My name is Dr. Laurence Tisi. I'm Chief Executive of Erba Molecular, part of the Erba Group. There's a few different trends. Molecular diagnostics has now been rolled out and accepted as being the method of choice for infectious disease and a variety of other disease states. The trouble is that it has been restricted to specialist laboratories. So one trend that we are seeing is trying to get technologies which make it not just simple but robust enough to take it outside of the specialist laboratories and nearer to the patient need. So this is about accessibility. So one key trend is making it accessible. Now that means economically accessible as well. It needs to be affordable because presently there have been premium tests which not everyone can afford. The other huge trend is called Nex-Gen sequencing. And this is a real revolution in molecular diagnostics, which is happening around us. You may not be aware of it, but in a few years' time, you will be having tests using Nex-Gen sequencing. It's an incredibly powerful technique, and it would even allow us to diagnose a disease when we're not even sure what disease we're looking for. We'll simply take samples, and we'll look for the genetic information associated with things we know cause disease. So this is the next big trend coming through, the new technologies coming through. But I would come back to the first point on accessibility, because new technologies are no good unless they're accessible. And our immediate priority and the trend that we're focusing on is to get these wonderful technologies out to those who need it. So for India in particular, and I give the example of TB, there are simply not enough people being tested. And even those who are tested, the tests being used are not sensitive enough to pick up the TB. And that's particularly true of children and particularly true of people with other diseases, in particular HIV. So there's a tremendous need for more testing. In addition to that, when you look at some of the febrile diseases, malaria, dengue, chikungunya, etc., these can be very difficult to diagnose or between them. And we can see molecular diagnostics helping to do this because it can give a definitive diagnostic of which disease is causing it. Again, it has to be accessible, and that means not just a low cost, but we need to support them. We need to train people to use the tests. They need to be simple to use. So for India, getting that accessibility is the critical part of how you design the new products for India. It means patients are going to know more sooner, and it means that we can better direct what therapeutics they need. If someone has a fever and you just give them antibiotics, that may not help them, and also we are prescribing too many antibiotics, which is causing drug resistance strains to come out. So it is unquestionably good for patient care to know quicker and more accurately the cause of the disease. The market opportunity is enormous. It is growing at over 10% still, even in the West, and it has hardly penetrated at all in India, really only in large reference centres. It's certainly not out into the medium to small size laboratories yet. So from a commercial point of view, it's also a very significant opportunity. And that is important because unless the technology is to some degree profitable, it will not be sustainable. Technologies which require lots of subsidy can be very difficult to maintain. So again, coming back to accessibility, it's very important that from a commercial point of view, it's independently viable. So for me, the hype has been that there's been lots of companies come with the new latest toy for molecular diagnostics. And technology on its own is not always the solution. I see the hope in what we're doing is this relationship now that we have with an Indian company, and we were formed part now of an Indian company, Transasia and Erba. And the hope here is that by combining not just the technology that we bring, but the infrastructure of a company which understands its market, the Indian market, and can serve it, that we can get that accessibility for the molecular diagnostics. So that's just for infectious disease testing in particular. when I reference the next-gen sequencing and the future technologies, the hope here is that we'll just get more information from patients so we can better inform them of their treatment needs. It's as simple as that. The challenges are the right challenges. People expect the tests to be excellent, and our challenges are to get the clinical data, the peer-reviewed data, and the confidence of the users to be absolutely assured to recommend these tests. And that is a general challenge, and it relates to the regulatory frameworks, of course, because it is absolutely critical that the tests that we put out and anyone puts out do properly work. And we welcome the regulatory framework because it's there to protect patients, and we are engaged with that to make sure our tests are as accurate and as economical and as valuable as possible. So this is a huge education challenge as well. We need to get people to understand molecular diagnostics, the value it brings to them, how to use the machines, and that's why it's really important that we have a really simple to use technology, which is not intimidating for people to adopt, even into a very small laboratory. So as we get more and more information out of these tests, it can be quite overwhelming for the physician, because you may have thousands and thousands of bits of information come from these tests. So what people are doing now is generating quite complicated and sophisticated databases, which will automatically sift through this data and give a recommendation, which can then be fed back to the physician to say, this person has X and you need to treat them with drug Y. And this is in progress at the moment. So there's, for example, there's a TB-Seq program which is collating all the different types of mutations associated with drug resistance in TB. So, like any test, molecular diagnostics has to be done correctly, and the quality of the material supplied to users has to be impeccable. So what we want is that the tests that are available have gone through vigorous regulatory approval. Now, that is part of what companies do, and that's why diagnostics provided by companies which have these accreditations, that you can trust the diagnostic. There's a quite separate question about what we do now with all the next-gen sequencing, and the regulatory sort of framework for that is still emerging. It's such a fast-moving area that is still to be resolved, but it is now like a tsunami of technology hitting what we can do, and I'm sure the regulators will come up with new frameworks soon to deal with that. 5 years from now, we hope to have molecular diagnostics as common as a glucose test, so that people can access it anywhere and to enjoy the benefits, particularly for, in the first instance, TB, but also some of the other diseases affecting India, dengue, chikungunya, etc. So to be that available, that so many people will get in the disease treated much sooner, and which will also reduce the spread of these diseases.